Thanks so much for joining us for another update on MarkTwainZephyr.com. Also our Facebook and Twitter pages at Mark Twain Zephyr. I'm Robert Tabor, Director of Passenger Development for the Wisconsin Great Northern Railroad, and it is Sunday, July 25th, 2021. And we're not at the railroad. We're coming to you from the capsule that is going up to the top of the St. Louis Arch. At 630 feet, the St. Louis Arch is the tallest monument in the United States and the second tallest in the world after the Eiffel Tower. What a view out the windows. Well, and we are here in St. Louis because we have just wrapped up our 14-stop tour, presentations and book signings along the original route of the Mark Twain Zephyr. If you total it all up, we had between 600 and 700 people join us at 14 stops along the way, starting in Galesburg a week and a half ago. It's been a really wonderful week and a really wonderful chance to meet everybody. So we're going to dedicate this Sunday update to some of the people who came out and shared some of their experience of actually riding the Mark Twain Zephyr. They had some really fun stories to share. So we head home tomorrow, and we will be back for another Sunday update on August 1st, back up at the Wisconsin Great Northern. Again, thank you to all the people who made the last week and a half very special, who came out to hear our presentations and buy a book or two. We really appreciate it. And on with the show. Folks who have actually ridden the Mark Twain Zephyr.
My grandparents lived in Quincy. We lived in Hannibal. And from time to time, my grandmother would, come to visit us. But of course, gasoline was rationed. She had to take the train. And sometimes the Mark Twain Zephyr was so crowded, she would have to stand between Quincy and Hannibal.
Wow.
And I remember, going down to the station with my family to greet her as she came off the train and that. But it's just the way it was.
There was reports that sometimes they would put people up in the baggage car in the Becky Thatcher. Did she ever talk about having to be stuck up in the baggage car with the chickens and the...
No, nothing like that.
Oh, okay. So if the train was oversold, they would make people stand too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Her name was Laura O'Brien.
Okay.
My father had a warehouse right adjacent to the railroad yards.
Oh.
And the fact is, I was down there many a time with him watching trains. In fact, this photograph you have, it shows the...
the famous...
warehouse.
Oh, so that was your father's warehouse in Hannibal. Mm-hmm. Stood right behind where the... Wow.
Right across from the train depot.
The Zephyr did run for a few years through Palmyra here, coming from north, I don't know, Quincy, wherever else it came from north, and went through Brookfield, Macon, on over to Kansas City. But I would get on the train in Palmyra, and it had to be the Zephyr because it was in that time period. And I would ride 15 miles to Monroe City, where my grandmother would be waiting for me, and I would visit her 3 or 4 days. I did that like 3 years, and it was always the smell that I experienced in that train. It was the air conditioning, but it's a scent that it still comes back to me if I happen to be in an old train.
Well, I was born in 48. My grandfather retired from the Q with about 50 years of service in 51 or 52. And Grandpa and Grandma had passes that they could ride for free. And I had an aunt and uncle who lived in St. Louis. So there were a couple times I remember riding on this, and we would always sit in the back. And for some reason...
Oh, so you got to sit in the Tom Sawyer.
We got in the very back.
Oh.
And I think it's because Grandpa knew people. And we would somehow always be able to get on before everybody else and get back there. And then my grandmother had this huge black purse, which today you'd call it a carry-on bag, and she always had ham and cheese sandwiches and chocolate chip cookies. And we'd get on, we'd sit in those seats at the very end, and we would move till we got to Quincy or St. Louis.
Oh, they didn't get you in the dining car?
No.
Oh, okay.
We didn't want to give up Grandpa didn't want to give up those seats.
So you ate the ham and the cheese instead of eating the food on the Huckleberry Finn.
Most of the time we didn't ride this, but there were a couple times I remember getting on this and being able to ride it.
Okay. What do you remember about the cars, or what do you remember sitting back there? You're one of the few people I met who's actually ridden in the first class. What was the view like going along the river with the beautiful?
It was beautiful. I just sit there and I don't think I moved. I think I sat there and just stared out the window, and I don't know if I would eat the sandwiches or just munch on the chocolate chip cookies. And I am thrilled to see somebody restoring some of the old Q equipment.
Well, it's always a pretty train I went through. I really liked it. I used to, when I was like 12 and 13 years old, we'd get on the train at Alexandria and ride it to Keokuk and go to the movies. We'd get on the train around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'd get out of the movies, we'd catch the train back around 5 o'clock in the evening and go back to Alexandria. It was a short run, but it was cheap, about a quarter or something like that. The old conductor, when we was coming back into town, he'd always holler, Ocean City instead of Alexandria.
In 1953 and 54, I lived in Canton, Missouri, and my sister and I used to bring the train over in the morning, and I'd drive off on Front Street in Quincy, and we went to Army Surplus store and Penny's and ate the sugar bowl and took in a movie, and then we'd catch the train and go back home.
Nice. You remember how much it costs?
I don't know if it was 25 cents for each one of us or it's 35 cents.
Okay. What stood out to you about the train? Did you sit in the coach section, or were you in the first class, the Tom Sawyer?
Coach section.
You'd always do the coach section. What about the train stands out in your memory? Just the design, or
Just design. It came through Canton all the time, twice a day.
What do you think about the refurbishment going on at the Wisconsin Grader?
I think it's fantastic. I really believe in people taking care of the past.
I went to a one-room schoolhouse the first 8 years of my life, and I remember our teacher at the time, back about 1938 or 39, when I was only about 10 or 11 years old, made a big deal about the Burlington Zephyr train. And of course that was all new to me, and I remember she talked about how it was the first of its kind. It was made out of stainless steel. It was diesel powered instead of steam, and it was very progressive or advanced for its time and all such things. And I don't think I ever got to ride it then, but I think we came to town maybe to see it. And I rode the Burlington Zephyr at least 2 or 3 times that I recall. Back in the late 40s, before I went into the military, I was living in St. Louis briefly, and I rode the Burlington Zephyr a time or two from St. Louis to Canton just to come up for the weekend.
My dad went over to West Quincy and bought train tickets for us, and we took the train from Quincy to Canton, Missouri. Got off in Canton, Missouri and visited with friends, and then that evening my dad came back and picked us, my mom and my brother, up and brought us back to Quincy.
It was a big occasion for my mom. My mom took my brother and I to St. Louis. I think we were visiting families. But the big thing was we had to get dressed and look right. We put on our Sunday best, and it was a big ordeal to go over there and get on that train. That was a major stop in those days, West Quincy. And I just remember this big, shiny vehicle. It was just beautiful. And the noises it made, and the luxury as I went in, and I was in awe. I was a small little kid, you know. And this was probably 55 or 57 in those years.
And just the last couple of years.
Was it?
Yeah.
And we got on and pulled out. It just felt good being on it, and it was an adventure for me and my brother. He was a few years older than I, and I remember, going through Hannibal, and we went along the river, and that was just such beautiful scenery, looking out the big windows. And
I was about 3 years old when they discontinued it, but my mother and father took their honeymoon to St. Louis on the Zephyr.
So your parents took the Mark Twain Zephyr on their honeymoon. What year would that have been?
1944, the November of 44.
November of 44.
Uh-huh.
And did they do anything special? Because it was a kind of an all-coach train. Did they
I remember,
pull anything off with the railroad?
I
Or
remember my mom talking about a lot of soldiers on the train coming back from the war and going over there. Yeah, they didn't really talk a whole lot about the train itself. They spent a few days in St. Louis and then took the train back.
Well, my grandfather started working with a CB&Q back in the 1880s. And
Wow.
he was out of Hannibal, Missouri. And eventually the family moved to Burlington 4 years after my father was born in Hannibal. And he came up here and continued to work with the railroad. That would have been in 1919. And eventually, he was chosen to be the head conductor on the maiden run of the Mark Twain Zephyr.
wow.
35. And my dad remembers when his dad walked down the hill just a few blocks over that way. He lived up by the big Catholic church, St. John's. And he walked down the hill to the Mark Twain Zephyr and got on board the Zephyr and went to St. Louis. And with brand new uniform, and was totally spiffed up for the trip, and it was the maiden run.
Thanks so much for joining us for another update on the Mark Twain Zephyr at the Wisconsin Great Northern Railroad. Before you go, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's really easy. Depending on what browser you have, just click on the red subscribe button on the lower right-hand side below the video screen, or perhaps it might be in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. This way, you won't miss any of our future updates. For restoration updates throughout the week, head over to marktwainzephyr.com and click on the Restoration Updates link. We usually add a few photos during the week. Our next video update will be next Sunday afternoon. And remember, you can stay in touch with us throughout the week 24/7 on social media. We mainly use Facebook at Mark Twain Zephyr. We also occasionally use Twitter at Mark Twain Zephyr as well. Once again, thanks for following us and liking us and supporting the Mark Twain Zephyr restoration effort at the Wisconsin Great Northern Railroad. We'll see you back next Sunday at this time.
Fly away.